Well, the top federal prosecutor in Delaware decided to pause a criminal investigation of Hunter Biden months before the 2020 election. According to reporting by the New York Post, federal prosecutors paused the process before reaching steps that would alert the public to their investigation, including requesting search warrants and issuing subpoenas.
In October 2020, right before the election, now Press Secretary Jen Psaki tweeted out a Politico article calling the Hunter Biden story Russian disinformation. So it's interesting that we're learning this about the federal investigation, and I wonder if this is related to rules around election interference.
Yeah.
At the federal prosecutorial level. In fact, that's what James Comey got dinged by the IG for, because his two press conferences, one where he said that they were reopening the investigation, and then the second one where they were saying that they were closing the investigation, both were in violation of those kind of guidelines that they have. Is that your read on what happened here, that this was specifically about the election? Hunter Biden himself wasn't running, but you can easily obviously connect it to an ongoing federal election.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can connect the dots, and this New York Post investigation is important because you can see how it stopped, as we read in the introduction, right before you would have gotten into those steps that would have found their way into the public. And so that in particular, I think, is a glaring sort of indication that this was probably happening for political reasons. And this is a good example, or a good case study in how wealthy and powerful people protect themselves, sort of just getting to these points where you can stonewall or slow walk investigations in an election season because somebody knows this appointment in this in this part of the government, and you can sort of just connect the dots on those sorts of details as well. It's a good case study in that. And the reason that Psaki tweet is, I saw it circulating on Twitter, people sort of bringing it back up, even though it's from last year, just before the election, is because they are now trying to alert Facebook as to what constitutes misinformation. And they're trying to get Facebook to ban their definition of misinformation, when their definition of misinformation by their own standards would often include banning themselves.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And we should remember that it's fine to say, you know what, New York Post, I'm not sure I'm ready to believe something in the New York Post. Fine. You know, discerning readers can question whether or not they believe something that's in the New York Times or MSNBC or CNN, whatever. But remember that there were these 50, national security experts who came out and said this is part of a Russian misinformation or Russian disinformation campaign. And remember that you always have to take these national security experts and current and former intelligence apparatus staffers with grains of salt as well. You can, that turned out to be its own disinformation campaign, and what the New York Post was reporting appears to, by all accounts, genuinely have been from the actual laptop of Hunter Biden. Yeah. Now, was it the result of a hack? That's a completely different question. There's been a lot of interesting reporting done based on hacked documents, and there shouldn't really be a blanket policy, because that's what they tried to use. That this is based on hacked documents, and so we're going to suppress this on our platforms. But that would rule out an enormous amount of information that is of value to the public.
Yeah. You know what's sad is that there actually is, and we talked about this last week, fake news is a very real thing. It's those cheesy ads that you see at the bottom of your articles that say, this person just died or whatever it is. It's a real thing. And Jen Psaki doesn't give a damn about disinformation. She cares about weaponizing the term for political purposes, and that exacerbates the very real problem. Now, that's not to say Donald Trump didn't routinely do the same thing with fake news, but it's just particularly rich coming from the people who claim to be above all of that with this air of sanctimony constantly. They do not give a damn about disinformation. If they did, they would stop weaponizing the term for political purposes, unless they're just stupid. And I guess that's a possibility too. I'm never going to rule that out. When you look at the Psaki tweet, it's just like, this is why people voted for Donald Trump, because you lie time and time and again and tell them that they're stupid to come to a different conclusion than you and that you're the one that's correct, when in fact it turns out, I mean, citing the national security experts or alumni of the sort of national security apparatus, it's just such an incredible exercise in elite sanctimony that, like, whoa, these national security experts, they couldn't possibly have any ulterior motives. They are not incompetent. They say this is Russian disinformation. If there's anybody at this point you should distrust in mediating those types of disputes, it's probably national security alumni.
Right. And Hillary Clinton does continue to blame those two Comey press conferences, and the Nates of the world, the Silver and the Cohn, will tell you that you did actually see numbers moving. You saw some votes shifting because the first time, because he was so aggressive in condemning her behavior, even though he said he wasn't going to prosecute her, and then the second time because he said then he gets all of this new information. He says he's going to review it, and then shortly thereafter he says he reviewed it and he found nothing there, and people were like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Although it was ridiculous for him to even re-review it, because they knew it was just a copy of the same emails that they had already looked through.
I was going to say, speaking of laptops,
right? So they
Anthony Weiner's laptop.
Anthony Weiner's laptop. So they determined, this was actually something we already looked through. So then he has another press conference that ticks off Trump voters, and they come out. So my question, what I'm curious about, do you think if this news of a federal prosecution or a federal investigation into Biden had emerged in October, that it actually moves votes, or was it Biden's brand so locked in? Grandpa Joe, he's the poor senator, and feelings about Trump and Biden so locked in that it just doesn't move enough votes for it to have mattered.
I'm inclined to say that.
Not that's why you do reporting, but I'm just curious. Yeah.
I'm inclined to say that, but then again, there are particular states where, like, say, suburban voters, Democrats really made inroads with those sort of suburban voters who may have voted Republican for a really long time, but were so disgusted by Donald Trump that they went for Joe Biden. I think if this had emerged earlier and there had been more time for the press to sort of pick apart what was going on, it's possible. And I mean, those are where the margins were really close in terms of the Electoral College, like possible swings. I mean, I wouldn't rule out the fact that it could have. I don't know that it would have changed the outcome.
So go with the crook we know.
Right, exactly. The grenade politics that we talked about last week. I think Biden was pretty successful when being juxtaposed with Trump at pretending he really, like, communicating to people, expressing to people that he was the candidate of decency. Not all people, but I think there's a chunk of maybe those key upper middle class, suburban, educated voters that may have been persuadable if this had been litigated more seriously.
Well, maybe we'll get to find out next time.
Yeah, maybe we will.
As this continues. We'll have more Rising for you right after this.